I'm going to go to Bull Put Credit Spread, and I'm going to go to search. Question comes in live from David. And David said, how does an in-the-money call debit spread make money? The pros and the cons. Okay, well, I don't see ELF. Oh, ELF is in here. But we're going to go with NVIDIA. Hot stock. I'm personally in an AMD. I'm going to make an adjustment to our fusion trade on that on Monday. I let the long put expire after being assigned. We're going to reopen it as a calendar put spread in the fusion portfolio on Monday. But NVIDIA, of course, also a rocket ship. What am I doing here in Bull Put Credit Spreads if David's asking about Bull Call Debit Spreads, an in-the-money call debit spread? The in-the-money Bull Call Debit Spread, David, is a parity trade to the out-of-the-money Bull Put Credit Spread. It'll have almost the same risk-reward tolerance. A risk-reward profile. It's a tolerance, my apologies. Let's go to the profit and loss chart for NVIDIA position here. Closed today at $594.91. We see that we can sell this 2nd of February, $547.5 put. Out of the money for the put by about $20 for $270. Well, that's the bid, but at the same time, we can buy the February 545 and we get 28 cents at the midpoint net credit on a 2.5 point spread. It's a 2-week out spread, 14 days out. The max risk is 223. The difference in the strike price is 250 minus that midpoint net credit, and that puts us at 223. So it's a 12.4% return on a leverage trade with an 86.4% probability. Now on a bull put credit spread, we're selling the higher strike put, buying the lower. As I mentioned, 279 and 252. So we receive a credit for this position because the 557.5 higher strike is closer to the stock price. They're both deep out of the money. They're below the stock price of the puts. David, of course, that's out of the money. We get a nice little net credit. We've got a 12.4, 12.5% return as long as NVIDIA remains above 547.50 at expiration. What happens in that scenario? Both puts expire worthless. We keep the net credit and we're done. However, our broker would require us to put up the margin amount, either the full $2.50 or possibly simply the maximum risk of $2.23 per contract, 223 for one, 2,230 if I did 10 contracts on the position. Some brokers do that. Others might just have you put up the full 5 points. I'm sorry, 2.5 points. Apologies on that. So $250. And we want the stock to stay above both strike prices. So both options expire worthless. We don't have to do anything and we keep the net credit. So max return of $27 to $28, maximum risk of 222 to 223, 12.6% return. And as we saw, we had that 86.4% theoretical probability. The stock would be above 547.50, David, 547.50 on the 2nd of February. Let me clear this out. So on the profit and loss chart, to use our view here to stay in February 2nd, scroll through all of our options, and I'm going to go to the calls. I may need to be in the 500s, my apologies. And that was the 547.50 and the 545, a 250 spread. Why am I adding the calls? Because this is the in-the-money bull call debit spread. Instead of selling the 547.5 put and buying the lower strike, we're going to sell the same 547.5 call at a premium of around $51 or so, $50.95. And we're going to pay a higher price for the deeper in-the-money 545 call, still 2.5 points apart. And it's going to be about $53.90 at midpoint. So what does that mean? Sorry, folks, let's scroll down here. We're going to sell the higher strike call that's not as deep in the money. We're going to buy the deeper in the money call. And, okay, this is not a good comparison. This kind of does illustrate an issue, though. But let's put this up to 52. No. Let's put this up to 51.45. Okay, so, but midpoint prices, I'm sorry, David, midpoint prices that we just entered, 51.05 here, and 53 93, roughly, put us at a cost with these deeper in the money calls, even at midpoint of 287.50, which is greater than the $2.50 difference in strike prices. So this is a negative return. Why are we seeing a negative return here? I would have paid a debit to get into this position. But typically the net debit, and the search tool would always show you this data, but the net debit has to be less than the difference in strike prices. So how you make a profit on the in-the-money debit spread is if the stock is above both strike prices, what do you have? You have an obligation, you have an in-the-money call that you don't own stock against. It's not a covered call. You have an obligation to deliver shares of stock at $547.50, but you have the right to buy those shares of stock at $545. So if you left this alone to expiration and the stock remained above $547.50, instead of both options expiring worthless as they do in a bull put, your broker would exercise the long to effectively buy shares of stock for you at $545 and immediately sell them at $547.50, so you get $2.50 back. The debit should have been, around $2.28 or $2.27, so that you would have made a profit of 25 or 27 cents against a risk of 222 or 223, or roughly a 12.4, 12.5% return. Same as the bull put credit spread because they're parity trades. This, however, does represent one of the cons you might run into looking for deep in the money bull call debit spreads. This is shorter term, I understand. But sometimes because they're deeper in the money, and if the bid-ask spreads are very wide and the activity is low, you can't get a reasonable price. We're looking to get filled at the midpoint, but if you can't get filled at the midpoint, you're too close to the difference in strike prices and the return is lower. In this case, at the preferred midpoint, this would actually be a negative trade where the parity out of the money bull put with the same strikes and same expirations was a positive 12.4% gain. The bid-ask spreads weren't that wild either. Now, we'll do a walkthrough of how you actually profit here. I'm going to change this to 41.45. I'm going to increase it by, no, I'm going to go higher. I apologize. I'm going to go up to 65. Not going to get that price, I know. But why am I doing this? I'm doing this to show you that, yes, if I entered this now, if I was able to get those prices by selling the $547.50 at $51.65, $53.93 at midpoint for the $545, I'd be paying $2.28, $2.27 for a $2.50 point spread. So if the stock stays above $547.50 at expiration, I can liquidate the position myself, David. I can sell to close my long for near intrinsic value, buy to close the short for near intrinsic value. I'll get close to that $2.50 back. There's my $22 profit, $23 profit, or 9.9%, 10%, 12%, getting close to it. Same structure, same risk reward profile as an out of the money credit spread, whether you look at bull or bear. Bear call credit spread versus the bear put debit spread, same thing. Same strike comparison, selling and buying, same expiration date. You should see a similar risk reward profile. And how you make money with the in the money call spread, as long as the stock stays above it, you can hold it through expiration, allow it to be exercised and assigned. You get the $250 back in the best case scenario, the difference in strike price is back. You paid the debit up front. So the return you get back is that difference in strike prices minus your net debit, which is almost the same exact monetary return, close to it, that we saw with the bull put credit spread. They're parity trades of one another. Now, we have a tool to help you evaluate which one would be better. We'll stick with NVIDIA, and then we'll use a different example. It's one of our signature tools called the spread chain, but you can also access this tool under bull put credit, bear call credit, linking to the spread chain. I don't think the Iron Condor has it, but yeah, the vertical spreads, debits and credits will have it. On the spread chain, I can put in some basic criteria. I want to do NVDA, and we're going to stick with that 14-day out position. But I'm going to look at put credit and call debit parity. I'm going to use spread width of 5. I can change it to 2.5. Minimum 2-cent net credit. Minimum, let's just do a 7% return. Probability range, I'm going to go greater than 75 to see some more examples. And I want the February 2nd expiration. Oh, sorry, let me submit that. My apologies. The February 2nd expiration. So here's our, okay, that's just because these 5 points. My apologies. Here's the 5-point spread of 547.5 and 542.5. Oh, see, over here is the debit spread. That's interesting. Even on the 5-point spread, the debit at midpoint would be 518. I know this is a different way to read it, so just bear with me here. It's 8% in the money. You've got an 86.4% probability, but on that 5-point spread here, it's a debit of 518. 18 cents higher than the debit you could get back. So this is one of the ones that's negative return. It's the only one in here where the 547.50 is doing that. Whereas the credit spread is giving an 11.1% return. Remember, this is the 5-point spread, not the 2.5 we initially looked at. But here's a different comparison. Still a good 83% probability. Strike of 552.50, 547.5. The bull put credit spread here, selling the 552.5 put, higher up, David, with a 547.5 put buying below the strike, 345 sell, 279 open at midpoint. As long as the stock stays above 552.50, both puts expire. We keep that net credit. 66 cents net credit, or a 15.2% return for the 14-day trade with an 83.6% probability. On the bull call side, the bull call debit, 551.05 at midpoint for the 552.50. 47.20 midpoint pay price. Strike that, reverse it. Sorry, folks. Buy price of 51.05 for the 547.50 strike. Sell price of 47.20 for the higher strike 552 for a net debit of 385 on a 5-point spread. Stock stays above both calls. I hold it through expiration, David. I have an obligation to deliver shares I stock I don't own at 552.50, but I have the right to buy those shares of stock at 547.50. So I allow that exercise to take place. I get 5 points back from that transaction. My net debit was only $3.85, so I make $1.15 on a risk of $3.85, or essentially a 30% return, with that same 83.6% probability. And that's what I look for when I've decided I've looked at the weekly bull puts and I've decided to make my trades for the Monday following my expiration, or the 2-week out, I should say. I'm going to come to the spread chain tool because I'm going to say, okay, here's what I decided. Here's the spread I decided I wanted with a 15.2% return, 83.6% probability. What's my parity debit? Whoa, it's a 29% return. It's almost double. Now, that's also hinging on the midpoint. I'd have to look at the activity, last option price. What do I think is the likelihood that I can get 47.20 for this 552.50 strike, and then I only pay around 51.05? If I don't get those midpoint prices and my debit goes up to $4, $4.10, or $4.15, the minute it exceeds $4.30, $4.35, it's now equal to the bull put. If the numbers are equal, and none of these are actually really, I would consider these equal at all. They're all different and all over the map. That is no projection of it being a better trade or that one's better than the other. It kind of does if you can't get a positive return on the debit spread, even at midpoint. But it's not an indication that something's bullish or something bearish. It's just more of an indication of midpoint pricing and what the market maker's looking for. and activity going on between unfulfilled orders at the time. But if they're close to the same, here, for example, I know it's way deep in the money, the 545.35, 90% probability with an 8.5% return for the credit spread and an 8.7% return for the debit spread, I'm going credit spread all day. 7.5% for this deeper in the money one and 7.5, I'm going with the credit spread. Why? Because when I've entered the bull put credit spread, I receive the credit up front. Yes, I have to put up the margin, the difference in strike prices, or of course, just the difference in strike prices minus the net credit received. It does everything I want, and I do hold it all the way to expiration, and both options, the stock's still above both strike prices in my credit spread, or in the bear call would be below both strike prices. Both options just expire worthless. That's it. Your broker may charge you that very small fee for expired options. Some do that, I understand. But in the debit spread, to get the maximum profit if you held it through expiration, your broker is essentially exercising your long call to deliver the short obligation. In the old days, this was a much bigger deal. Nowadays, it's not as big a deal with all of the competition and everything that happened with the options commissions in the last several years, last 5-6 years. But in the old days, when you were maybe paying $15 to $16 per contract for a stock purchase or for an option assignment, that's the problem. You have maybe up to 2 separate transactions that you're going to be billed for in your broker in the debit spread because it has to be actively closed by your broker. You might get charged another options commission. You might get charged 2 options commissions, or you may even get charged a stock commission because essentially they're buying shares of stock for you to sell them at this obligation price that you have. You might actually get 2 stock commissions depending on your broker. So in the old days, that was a lot worse. What are we talking about here? When we were talking about the original video position, we were talking about 23 cents of net credit or $23 of a maximum profit. Right, 5 contracts, let's say that's $115. In the old days, when I was with Options Express, for example, and I got assigned on a bull call debit spread, where I paid $226 to get $227 to get in the position, I'm looking to make 23 cents or about that 10%, 11% return. I did 5 contracts, so it came out to be $115. Well, they were going to charge me one options commission at $7.95, I think it was at the time, and then the stock commission at $15.95. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, does it? Well, it's $24. And if my profit on 5 contracts was 100 and what did I say, 120, 100 and about 110, 115. That's 20% of my profit. Going back to commissions in the old days, I understand. Whereas if I just did the credit spread, got the 115 for the 5 contracts at 23 cents, and both options expired worthless because the stock remained above, it was a ding for whatever their options expired was, not $7.95. I think it was 35 cents, just for like paperwork fees or something along those lines. That's why I'd say I would do the credit spread all day if they were within 1, 2, or 3%, or 0.1, 0.2, 0.3%, maybe even 0.5% of one another on the parity view in the spread chain. But again, if I see something outlandish on one side or the other, naturally the one example we were looking at with the 547.5 strike, I think that was the problem here. Even the 5-point spread showing a negative with the call debit spread. Yeah, no, bull put. Doing that one. Get down here, though, 83% probability, and we're seeing a 29% return if we can get filled at midpoint in the bull call debit versus a 15% return doing the bull put credit. I'm going to try to place that order. If this is the trade I'm making, I'm going to try to place that bull call debit and get as close to that midpoint as possible, knowing that over here my risk would be, or my profit view would be 66 cents versus 434 risk. If I could get 385 and make a potential, even if it's at $4, I can make $1 out of 4, 25%. I don't get the exact midpoint I want. Yeah, I'm still doing a little bit better than I am over here risk reward wise. I'm going to target that bull call debit spread at that point. But again, I'd have to look at the last prices, open interest, current volume in the day. Is it likely I can get those mid prices? Are the last prices falling close to that midpoint price I need to make that possible, make that a good possibility? That's what I want to see. But if it's there, I'm shooting for it. I'm going to go to it. And even, like I said, even if I get filled at $4, that's still a 25% return, still above what I'd get on the bull put credit. But similar returns, 0.2, 0.3, maybe as much as 0.5%. I'm probably going bull put all day long. 2 or 3% higher? 8% higher? Let me see if I can get that midpoint on the debit spread. And as long as the bull call debit remains in the money, David, you get closed out for the maximum profit. Remember, you can always close it out early as well. You can liquidate your bull call debit spread just like you can liquidate the bull put credit spread. The max return occurs at expiration when all time values out of both options. Or you do the stock assignment and expiration. That's when that maximum peak return is available. If you close it early, you're still going to make a profit potentially if the stock's above the strike price and you're 1 or 2 day, both strike prices, excuse me, and you're 1 or 2 days away from expiration. Yeah, but again, if you close it out early, you're not going to get the full intrinsic. You're not going to pay just intrinsic value. There's going to be some time value left on both options, and that's going to drop the return slightly. Same in the bull put credit. You know, I could have made 15%, let's say, on that parity trade here, the 552, 547.5 bull put. I'm 2 days away from expiration. The stock's still up here in the 590s. I can close this position and still make, let's say, 14.5%. Well, I've made 80% of what I expected to make. Even though I'm paying some time value for the 2 days remaining, let me take that profit off the table, still make a good 14.7%, and look to make new trades. Don't have to worry about it. Or, you know, I'm confident, just leave it alone for the next 2 days. Let it expire worthless, and we're good to go. All right. So that's the debit spreads. That's how the debit spreads make money. Other resources you might want to check out, David. If you go, of course, let me go to bull call. Let me add bull call debit. I don't have it here. And take out long collar, I guess, for now. Let's just go ahead and add the bull call debit to our available tab menus. Save that configuration. And the bull call debit home, you see here that you have the tools, of course, in the main home view, but then you have the Learning Center. You could go to the YouTube Bull Call Debit Spread playlist. There we go. And we have a variety of playlists for many of the different strategies. It's about 9 to 11 videos, which walk you through tools, criteria, review, a look at in-the-money bull call deficits, risks, profit and loss, criteria, in-the-money versus out-of-the-money bull call debits. And then this one you might want to take a look at here a little bit more, even though, you know, this one we did about 22 minutes on, but there's one here, bull call debit or bull put credit. Only 14 minutes long there. Stops on debit spreads, 7 ways to manage a bull call debit spread as you want to go further and further in the